The recipe was missing, but the motive was clear. Welcome to Mystery Parlor. I am your host, Axon. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments. Your words always add flavor to these stories. Let's begin. It was Tuesday, which meant Fritz was elbow deep in duck livers and chervil, and Wolfe was deep in that mid-morning coma he calls peace. I had finished typing a letter to a wine merchant Wolfe pretends to loathe but keeps ordering from, and was toying with the idea of an early lunch, until the doorbell rang. That in itself wasn't a war crime, but what came after might have made Wolfe petition for exile to Montenegro. I answered it. The woman in the doorway was mid-30s, dressed like Fifth Avenue money, but her eyes weren't buying, pale blue and scanning fast. She looked me over like I was a portfolio she was considering shorting. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, voice smooth but tight-wrapped, like silk pulled over barbed wire. I tipped my hat, metaphorically. "Depends. If you're a process server, I'm his cousin Archie from Cleveland." That got me half a smile. "I was told to come here. It's urgent." I stepped aside. "Everything is. Come in." I parked her in the red chair in the office, and made the trip upstairs to the plant rooms, where Wolfe was communing with orchids and the universe in roughly that order. I didn't need to say anything, just opened the door, stood in the threshold and waited. He looked up like I'd just suggested we switch to powdered hollandaise. "I abhor interruptions at 11, Archie." "Then you'll abhor this one plenty. A lady's downstairs. Urgent." He eyed me like he was measuring my pulse from 30 feet. "Did she strike you as frivolous?" "Nope. And I'm pretty good at detecting frivolity, especially in heels." "She's got something sharp to say." With a grunt that meant he considered my evaluation barely serviceable, he waddled over to the bench, barked 2 orders at Theodore about misting and a temperature valve, then began the slow descent to the office, like a Roman general returning from a very disappointing conquest. When he entered, the woman stood. Wolfe gave a fractional nod and lowered himself behind his desk like he was lowering the national flag. "My name is Alexandra Veal," she began. "I'm the managing editor of Culinary & Co., a publishing house for cookbooks and culinary memoirs." That explained the clothes and the composure. She had the poise of a woman who'd been asked to reprint Julia Child without the butter. Wolfe closed his eyes. "Miss or Mrs. Veal, I regret your errand. I do not entertain cases involving royalties, publishing rivalries or misplaced manuscripts." "I do not?" "It's about a theft," she interrupted, "and possibly sabotage. The manuscript of our most anticipated cookbook was tampered with. 1 page was torn out just before print, and the author insists he didn't remove it." That got his eyelids to lift a 1/4 inch. I leaned forward, because this was getting a whiff of originality, and anything that throws Wolfe off his pattern is worth listening to. Wolfe grunted. "Authors are careless and prone to melodrama." "Not this one," she said. "You may know the name, Lucien Lafarge." Wolfe opened both eyes. "Lucien Lafarge is not a name," he said crisply. "It is a condition, a culinary tempest. I know of him. The man cooks like he's angry at mediocrity. He's also prickly, vain, and refuses to work with editors," she said, with less judgment than experience. "But he insists, absolutely insists, that someone remove the page from the galley proofs of his new book. A recipe. He won't say which." I cut in. "So what's the harm? 1 recipe, big deal. He's got what? 99 left." Alexandra turned her eyes on me like I'd suggested replacing foie gras with canned beans. "That recipe," she said, "was the final course in his magnum opus. The signature dish. The one no one's ever seen." "Ah," Wolfe said softly. "The crescendo. The codetta. The reason for the performance." "Yes. And now it's missing. Just before print." I gave a low whistle. Wolfe reached for a finger to tap. "What has been done?" he asked. "Police?" She shook her head. "Lucien refuses. He's too proud. He demanded we delay printing until he investigates himself. But I think it was deliberate. I think someone inside Culinary sabotaged the launch." "Sabotaged it? Why?" I asked. "Revenge? Recipe envy? That's what I'd like to know." Wolfe's gaze narrowed. "Miss Veal, you said it was torn out, not misplaced." "Yes." He leaned back. "Torn by whom?" "I don't know. That's why I'm here." Wolfe closed his eyes again. Mr. Goodwin, get the name of everyone who has touched that manuscript between Miss Lafarge's hands and the printer's. I blinked. You're taking the case. He didn't open his eyes. Someone dared remove a final page from a masterpiece. A gastronomic insult has been committed. Yes, Archie, I am taking the case. Alexandra Veal gave the ghost of a smile. He said you might understand. He was mistaken. Wolfe murmured, I do not understand. I intend to correct that. She left a folder, timelines, names, layout stages, and promised to return if summoned. Wolfe barely nodded at her exit. I stayed put, watching him scan the list. It's just a recipe, Wolfe, I said. He looked up. So is a treaty. So is a will. What is written, especially what is missing, can alter empires. I raised a brow. And here I thought it was about duck confit. He shut the folder. It is always about more than duck confit. And just like that, the brownstones piece was torn like a recipe page, deliberately and with precision. By the time Alexandra Veal had stepped out into the June heat and the door clicked shut behind her, Wolfe had already ordered me to call Saul Puns, not to use him yet. Wolfe just liked to put tools on the bench early. I phoned Saul and told him to hang loose. Something might be cooking. He chuckled and said he'd sharpen his fork. That done, I returned to the office, where Wolfe was thumbing through the folder she'd left like it was a court transcript. 7 names, he said, not looking up, each with access to the manuscript at different points. He flipped a page. Proofreader, junior editor, marketing liaison, print supervisor, culinary consultant, assistant to Lafarge, and of course Miss Veal herself. And the chef? I asked. Lafarge, he said with a small grimace, has secluded himself. He refuses to leave his apartment and declines contact, except by courier or trusted intermediary. I shrugged. Typical genius. Sulking over a missing soufflé. He is not sulking. He is stewing. There is a difference. I held up a hand. You're the expert on both kinds of sim. He ignored that. Instead he jabbed the paper. We begin with the assistant. Her name is Sherry Trimble. She claims to have delivered the galley to the internal editor for markup. She found no damage. She insists. I nodded slowly. Want me to pay her a call? No. I want her here. Call Miss Veal. Inform her that I require the presence of Miss Trimble at 3 o'clock this afternoon. She may attend herself if she wishes. I made the call. Alexandra was brisk, but not surprised. Sherry won't like being summoned. She warned me. Then it's good. Wolfe isn't concerned with people liking things. She hung up after promising to handle it. At 2:58, I was stationed by the door. At 3:01, it opened to reveal Miss Trimble, who looked like she'd lost a bet with her curling eye. She had a stack of folders, a bag over her shoulder, and a wary look in her eye that told me she knew she was being walked into a minefield. Alexandra Veal followed a half step behind her, immaculate as before, with an expression that said she wasn't here to referee. We ushered them in. Wolfe, seated behind his desk, with a napkin already tucked under his chins in anticipation of dinner 2 hours away, gave a fractional nod of acknowledgement. Miss Trimble, he said, you handled Mr. Lafarge's galley proofs personally. Yes, sir, she said, her voice tight. I picked them up from his residence and delivered them to our editing department. They were intact. Did you examine the contents? No, she admitted. Lucien doesn't allow anyone to preview. I was strictly the courier. You never opened the bind. You never opened. She hesitated. I checked the front page for the label, made sure the folio was complete by count, but I didn't read the recipes. If that's what you're asking. It is, Wolfe said. And after you delivered the manuscript, I signed it over to Desmond Luce, our junior editor, standard chain of custody. Were there any copies? No. Lucien was adamant about that. We weren't even allowed to digitize until the final pass. I asked, so the only physical version was this one binder? Yes. Wolfe's gaze narrowed like a safe door closing. Tell me about Mr. Luce. Sherry glanced at Alexandra, who gave a nearly invisible nod. That annoyed me. I don't like people checking with each other for permission in Wolfe's office. He's been with Culinary a year, she said. He's thorough but green. Lucien didn't like him. Why not? Desmond asked questions. Challenged ingredient listings. Lucien saw it as meddling. Wolfe sighed through his nose. So Mr. Luce was known to have opinions. Alexandra finally spoke. Everyone in publishing has opinions. Desmond's mistake was thinking Lucien would consider his. Wolfe waved a hand. You are both excused for now. Mr. Goodwin will contact you if further clarification is needed. They filed out. Sherry gave me a look like she wanted to protest, but I gave her a smile that said not here, not now. Back in the office, Wolfe rolled his head toward me. Desmond Luce, begin there. I gave him a salute and hit the sidewalk. It was 4:45 and hot enough to toast baguettes on the pavement. Culinaire's Midtown office was one of those open-concept nightmares. Glass panels, brushed steel, shelves of color-coded hardcovers that looked less red than posed with. Desmond Luce was working at a standing desk and looked the part, shirt too small, glasses too large. Hair trying to grow in 3 directions. He didn't look like a saboteur. But then most saboteurs don't, they just look underpaid. I introduced myself and flashed a card. He blinked like he thought I was there to collect a debt. You worked on the Lafarge galley, I said. He nodded. Until I was pulled. Pulled? Miss Veal reassigned me. She said I was antagonizing the author. I grinned. You mean you disagreed with a guy who thinks béarnaise sauce is a religious experience? He grimaced. I just asked if the custard ratio in one of his soufflés was feasible at sea level. He called me a wart. Sounds like you made an impression. I was just trying to help. His recipes are brilliant, but he writes like he's dictating to a flunky with a stopwatch. Did you see the last recipe, the one that's missing? He blinked again. No. It wasn't in the version I had. The last page was blank. I paused. Blank? Yes, like it had been intentionally left empty. I thought it was a mistake. Or maybe a placeholder. You didn't say anything? He looked defensive. I did. Sherry told me to let it go, that Lafarge would fill it in later. He never did. I made a mental note. So if it was blank when you saw it, and missing now, then it was added later. And torn out even later. Thanks, Luce, I said, and meant it. He looked like he was relieved to have someone believe him or at least listen without barking. Back at the brownstone, I gave Wolfe the report. Sherry says it was complete, I said. Desmond says it wasn't. And both may be telling the truth, Wolfe murmured. If Lafarge added the page after Desmond's review, and before delivery to typeset, that narrows the window. I nodded. So what now? Talk to the print supervisor. In time, he said. For now, get the floor plan of Culinaire's offices. I want to know whose desk is within reach of whose inbox. Also, find out whether any of the 7 had culinary training. Why? Because the missing recipe matters only if it could be understood and envied. I stood. What if it wasn't just about envy? What if it was insurance? Wolfe's eyes gleamed. Then someone's afraid of what Lucien Lafarge knows, or what he might prove. That was all I got out of him before he buzzed Fritz to ask if the capons had been turned. But I had a feeling Wolfe's appetite was shifting toward a much more satisfying dish than chicken. I began the next day by paying a visit to a man who once cooked cassoulet in a Harlem tenement with all the fervor of a cathedral priest. One of those culinary types who'd done time under Lafarge's terrifying tutelage and lived to tell the tale. His name was Vince Paolo, currently on the editorial board at Culinaire in a consultant role which I translated loosely to, he makes sure the time goes where the time should go, and no one substitutes margarine in anything under his watch. He had agreed to meet me at a French cafe in Soho, that he swore had the only edible tartiflette in the city. When I arrived, he was already halfway through one and dabbing his lips with the kind of linen napkin that says you know your truffles from your turnip. Goodwin, he said, waving me down. Alexandra told me you'd be poking around. I assume this is about Lucien's tantrum. Close. I'm interested in the missing page. He sighed, through his nose like I'd mentioned a family scandal. So it's true. Looks that way. He says someone tore it out. I'm guessing you had eyes on the manuscript at some point. He nodded. Not directly, but I worked with Lucien during the development phase. Before he locked it all down, that recipe, whatever it was, he kept under wraps. Didn't even name it aloud, just called it the culmination. Said it would make all the others irrelevant. Sounds modest. Lucien's modesty is like his patience. Imaginary. I sipped my coffee. Could someone have taken it just to mess with him? Paolo's brow furrowed. If you're asking who would benefit from sabotaging him, plenty of people. But actually executing it, you'd need to know where the manuscript was, when it was accessible, and how to get past a dozen layers of paranoia. Could someone in the office do it? He didn't answer right away. He stirred his coffee, staring into it like it might solve things on its own. Finally, he said, maybe. But whoever it was knew exactly which page to grab, and why it mattered. And that implies, he set down that they either had access to Lucien's notes, or were close enough to guess what he was about to reveal. And afraid of it, I left him chewing his tartiflette, and went back to the office with that thought chewing me. At the brownstone, Wolfe was seated in his office, hands steepled as Fritz polished a silver serving tray in the dining room. The smell of warm yeast from freshly baked brioche teased in from the kitchen. I gave Wolfe the run. Paolo thinks someone did this not out of spite, but fear, I said. Wolfe closed his eyes. That is more credible than jealousy alone. Jealousy is too loud. This was surgical. I nodded. I also got a look at the culinary floor plan. I handed him a rough printout. Sherry Trimble's desk is catty corner to the manuscript handoff station. Desmond's is 2 rows back. Marketing has a walk-through path beside it. And the typesetter never touches the manuscript directly, only scans it after it's been approved. All digital by then. So the tampering had to occur before the transfer to digital. Right. He leaned back and let out a breath like a balloon deflating with dignity. Call Saul. I want him to observe Miss Trimble and Mr. Luce for 48 hours. Discreetly. Note meetings, calls, side trip. I'll need to know if they are reacting or acting. I made the call. Saul took the names and asked no questions. That's why we keep him. The rest of that day passed in little waves. Wolfe grunted through the next 2 suspects' background file. Alexandra sent over a scanned copy of the binder spine for Wolfe to analyze. Yes, he insisted, and I fielded a polite but clearly irate voicemail from Lucien Lafarge's personal courier, who accused us of meddling in an alchemy beyond bureaucrats. Wolfe found it flattering. That evening, while Wolfe dined on roast squab with orange glaze, and I made do with a sandwich that had dreams of being something better, the phone rang. It was Saul. I've got something, he said. Sherry Trimble met with a man I can't place. Not culinary. 40 tall, heavy tan, silk tie with embroidered forks. Met her at a hotel bar near Grand Central. She looked tense. Did they argue? No. But she kept looking around like she didn't want to be seen. He slid her a manila envelope. They both left through different doors. That perked me up. You got the guy's plate. No car, but I got his glass. Want it? I whistled. You never disappoint. We arranged a handoff, and by midnight I was staring at a fingerprinted glass wrapped in tissue on my desk. Wolfe didn't rise from bed for anything short of arson, but I knew in the morning he'd want it tested. I left a note for Lon Cohen to run the prints through his friendly contact downtown. Next morning the breakfast table was unusually quiet. Wolfe was devouring eggs Florentine like they'd personally insulted him. I waited until he'd mopped the last drop of hollandaise before giving him the update. He chewed that information the way he chews all information, slowly, with intent to judge. A man meeting Miss Trimble clandestinely, handing her an envelope, and evading exit by diversion. He murmured, yes. Yes, Archie. That is a thread. Want me to yank it? No. Tug gently. That meant another visit. This time I dropped by the culinary office again but made it less formal. I found Sherry at her desk, hair slicked back in a bun that was trying hard not to look guilty. Morning, I said cheerfully. Thought I'd return your boss's folder, maybe see how things are going. She smiled, a little too quickly. Everything's fine. Great. Say, were you at the Grand Union Hotel last night? That smile faltered just a flicker. Yes. I met a friend for drinks. Friend with a flair for cutlery neckwear. She blinked, then froze. I leaned in. Listen, Miss Trimble, Wolfe knows you met someone. He knows there was an envelope. He doesn't jump to conclusions, but he does land on them pretty hard once the facts line up. Her voice dropped. I didn't do anything wrong. Then say that again when Wolfe asks you. She hesitated, then reached into her drawer and pulled out a small notepad. She tore off a sheet and scribbled. His name is Derek Almond. He's a chef. Used to work under Lucien. He contacted me last week, said he had a business proposal. What kind? She hesitated again. He wanted to publish a book, a response to Lucien's, said he had ideas Lucien had stolen, claimed to have proof. I folded the note, and you believed him. I didn't say I did. I said he contacted me. He offered money for information. I turned him down. But you still met him. She looked exhausted. I was curious and stupid. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe raised his brows at the name. Derek Almond. He mused. Yes, I've heard the name. Banished by Lafarge after a failed source demonstration. A public shaming. So you think he's behind this? I think he is adjacent to it, and perhaps leveraged someone else's anger. Just then the phone rang again. I picked it up. Lon Cohen. You've got a hit, he said. Prints on that glass match Derek Almond. Minor record. Nothing flashy. But guess what? Do tell. He recently incorporated a small publishing firm. 1 week ago. Name? What? Culinary Reckoning. Ring any bells? I looked at Wolfe, who had already closed his eyes in satisfaction. Yes, we had our first solid ingredient, and Wolfe was starting to stir the pot. When I walked into Wolfe's office with that little tidbit from Lon Cohen, he was where he always is when things start to boil behind his desk, fingers steepled, eyes half closed, pretending not to be interested, but his nostrils flared, which in Wolfe speak is the equivalent of a man leaping to his feet with a war cry. Culinary Reckoning, I said, a freshly minted publishing house founded by a guy who used to work under Lucien Lafarge, got humiliated by him in public, and now slides envelopes to Sherry Trimble over gin and plausible deniability. Wolfe opened one eye. The name is vulgar. The timing is precise. Agree. Almond meets with Sherry after the page goes missing. Maybe he wants to preempt Lucien's big reveal with one of his own. Maybe he wants to prove Lafarge stole something. Maybe he has the missing page. Wolfe finished. I nodded. Would explain the envelope. Wolfe tapped a finger on the edge of the desk. Miss Trimble claims she declined his offer, but she met him, and she lied about it. That makes her complicit, even if only by omission. Want me to pay Mr. Almond a visit? Wolfe looked pained, as if the mere suggestion required physical exertion on his part. Yes, but first, call Mr. Lafarge. Inform him. I must speak with him today. No couriers. No tantrums. Here. In person. I gave him a long look. You think he'll come? He will if you tell him his signature recipe has resurfaced, possibly under another man's name. That was the kind of bait Lafarge couldn't resist if it were tied to a duck leg and served with truffle oil. I made the call. It took 3 tries and a lot of soothing the pride of a man who believed he invented the egg, but I finally convinced him to visit the brownstone at 2 p.m. sharp. Wolfe instructed Fritz to prepare nothing but black coffee and to keep the silver hidden. Lafarge had a habit of critiquing plate. With that settled, I headed out to find Mr. Derek Almond. He was listed as the chef-owner of a boutique restaurant in Brooklyn, called Red Salt, a name that sounded trendy enough to keep Instagram influencers drooling into their phones. I arrived just after the lunch crowd had cleared, and the maitre d', who looked like he brushed his teeth with seafoam, led me to a back office. Derek Almond was in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered with knife-calloused hands and the tan of someone who either grilled outdoors or vacationed frequently on someone else's dime. He gave me a look like I was the health inspector. Archie Goodwin, I said. I work for Nero Wolfe. His eyes narrowed. And I suppose you're here about Lucien. You suppose correctly. He sat back, crossed his arms. Let me guess. He's throwing a fit, accusing people, swearing vengeance. Close. He's sitting quietly in a chair while other people do the swearing. We're just trying to recover a page that vanished from his manuscript. Possibly the most important page. I wouldn't know anything about that, Almond said. That's odd, I said, because I have you meeting Sherry Trimble 2 nights ago. Hotel bar. You handed her an envelope. I've got your prints on the glass. His jaw tightened. That was nothing. A sample pitch. I'm launching my own line. I know. Culinary Reckoning. Sounds like a manifesto. Or a threat. He leaned forward. Lucien deserves to be challenged. You think he invented flavor? You know what he did to me. Public source debacle. I said. Something about bechamel. He humiliated me in front of a room full of food writers. Threw a spoon at me. Said my reduction had the consistency of phlegm. Charming. I was 27, Almond went on. It cost me 3 years of jobs. No one would touch me, and now one would touch. He gave me a grim smile. Now I touch back. Do you have the missing page? No. You want me to believe that? He stood. I don't care what you believe. I'm not scared of Lafarge, and I'm not intimidated by Nero Wolfe. I gave him a grin. Oh, you should be. He didn't escort me out, which was fine. I had everything I needed. Not proof, but tone. Almond had the desperate confidence of a guy who thought he had something valuable and was scrambling to weaponize it before it slipped away. Back at the brownstone, I walked in just as Lucien Lafarge was being shown into the office. He looked like an advertisement for rage in a double-breasted suit, face flushed, lips tight, eyes darting like he was grading the furniture. Wolfe, seated behind his desk, offered only a nod. I took a spot on the couch and braced for verbal shrapnel. You said you had news, Lafarge snapped. And if this is a waste of time, Mr. Lafarge, Wolfe said, cutting him off with a calm that could chill consommé. Please sit. Lafarge did. The missing page of your manuscript, Wolfe said, may be in the possession of a man named Derek Almond. Lucien's face contorted like he'd been force-fed supermarket cheese. That thief, that peasant, thieves rarely steal what they cannot use, Wolfe replied. What was on the page? Lafarge paused. Then, with evident reluctance, he said, a reinvention of poulet, en vessie, with modern emulsification techniques and a reduction sauce never published. Wolfe inclined his head. A climax. Yes. A recipe I developed over a decade. I asked, would Almond know enough to replicate it? Lafarge sneered. He would know enough to ruin it. Wolfe leaned back. Then I suggest you remain available. If Almond attempts to publish, we will need a precise account of what has been altered and what has been misrepresented. Lafarge stood. If he prints a single word of my technique, a single word, I will bury him in court. And if he doesn't, Wolfe then I will still bury him, Lafarge said, and stormed out. I waited until the echo of his ego faded down the hallway. So, I said, we've got Almond bluffing, Lucien fuming, Sherry sweating, and Desmond still trying to figure out which pan goes where. What's next? Wolfe looked toward the kitchen, where the clock chimed 4. We invite all parties here, he said. Tomorrow evening, Miss Veal, Miss Trimble, Mr. Luce, Mr. Paolo, and if he'll come, Mr. Almond. I blinked. You're calling the gathering already? No, I'm preparing the board. The game is nearly arranged, and the move, he gave me a faint smile, will be mine. I didn't know what he was planning, but if Wolfe was this calm, someone was about to get flambed. By the time Thursday evening rolled around, the brownstone had been dusted, aired, and reinforced like a fortress expecting siege. Fritz had polished the silver trays to a blinding sheen, though none would be used. Wolfe insisted no food be served during confrontation. Chewing and truth are incompatible, he'd once said, probably during a debate about whether garlic belonged in gazpacho. Our guests arrived in staggered order, by Wolfe's request. It was deliberate. He liked to observe people waiting. Some of his most precise judgments, he claimed, came not from what people said, but how they sat in silence when their turn hadn't come. First, through the door was Vince Paolo, all crisp linen and skeptical frown. I parked him in the front room with a copy of Le Guide Culinaire, and no coffee. Next was Desmond Luce, carrying a notebook and wearing the facial expression of a kid, waiting to be told his science fair project had exploded. He asked if this was about his job performance. I told him it wasn't, unless he'd recently begun moonlighting as a manuscript thief. Sherry Trimble arrived third. Her hair was looser than last time, and she had the air of someone bracing for impact, but hoping the seatbelt held. She asked if Alexandra would be attending. I said yes. She didn't ask about Derek Almond, but her silence was louder than a siren. Almond showed up last, exactly 15 minutes late, which Wolfe viewed as either a power play or a sign of chronic narcissism. I escorted him in with a neutral expression, though I was tempted to pat him down for recipe cards. Alexandra Veal, always punctual, arrived precisely on the dot, and settled into the red chair with a spine made of piano wire. She greeted no one. Once everyone was assembled in the office, Wolfe made his entrance. He moved slowly as he always did, like a battleship changing course. He took his seat behind the desk, without acknowledging anyone individually. Then he folded his hands and began. "You are all here," he said, "because a page is missing. Not just any page, a final page. The terminal note in a symphony of culinary expression. Some of you may believe that a single page is insignificant. I do not, and neither does Lucien Lafarge." He paused. Let the silence stretch until it hummed. "I do not intend to ask who took it," he said. "I already know." That made everyone sit just a little straighter. "Miss Veal," Wolfe said, turning slightly, "you trusted your pros. You believed your staff would treat Lafarge's manuscript with the reverence due to a sacred text. That trust, while commendable, was misplaced." Alexandra's lips pressed into a single white line. "Mr. Luce," Wolfe continued, "you saw the final page as blank. That was accurate. When you saw it, the recipe had not yet been inserted." Desmond gave a tight, embarrassed nod. "Miss Trimble," Wolfe said, "you ferried the manuscript at every stage. You believed, perhaps, that your role was administrative, but you were observed meeting with a man, Mr. Almond, who has a documented grievance against Lafarge. You received an envelope from him. You failed to report it. That is not administrative. That is complicit." Sherry opened her mouth, but Wolfe held up a finger. "Not yet." She closed it. "Mr. Paulo," Wolfe said, "your role has been the most invisible but not inconsequential. You knew Lafarge's style. You knew the stakes. But you said nothing about the missing page even when rumors surfaced. I can only conclude you suspected where it went, and preferred to stay out of the blast radius." Vince didn't argue. Wolfe turned last to Derek Allman. "You have, through shell corporations and bluff, attempted to suggest that you possess an original culinary work, one that responds to Lucien Lafarge's magnum opus. You do not. What you possess is a poor photocopy of a single page, obtained through coercion, and now rendered worthless by your inability to understand its structure." Allman scoffed. "That's conjecture." "No," Wolfe said. "It is sequence." He reached into his drawer and produced the folder Alexandra had originally brought. He opened it flat on the desk. The manuscript was passed from Lafarge to Miss Trimble, then to Mr. Luce, then to Lady. There is one moment, one where the manuscript sat unattended in a holding tray while Miss Trimble took a call. That call was from you, Mr. Almond. I have records. The page was removed then." Wolfe tapped the desk once, sharply. "You made your move early. You thought to sell the recipe to an investor, perhaps pitch it as inspired by Lafarge, but you had no ability to replicate it, so you offered it to Miss Trimble as leverage. She refused, but she did not confess." Wolfe turned to Sherry. "That was your mistake." She looked like she wanted to disappear into the chair. "You see, ladies and gentlemen," Wolfe went on, "this case was never about theft. It was about insecurity. Mr. Almond wanted vengeance. Miss Trimble wanted opportunity. Mr. Paulo wanted distance. Only Miss Luce, ironically, acted with anything close to professional honesty." Desmond blinked. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. "For him, a dramatic lunge. I have contacted Lucien Lafarge," he said. "He has agreed to reinsert the final recipe. He will name the dish publicly. He will also name the saboteur. And should Mr. Almond attempt to publish anything even resembling Lafarge's creation, legal action will follow within the hour, complete with photographic comparisons and witness affidavits." Almond stood. "You have nothing." "I have the original," Wolfe said. "Liar. No. Mr. Lafarge provided it to me yesterday, once he understood the stakes. I now possess the handwritten original, signed and dated. Your photocopy, if it even exists, is already obsolete." Allman's hands twitched, then dropped. He turned and stalked out without another word. The room stayed still. No one breathed. Wolfe waved a hand. "Mr. Luce, Miss Trimble, you may go." They left quickly. Paulo lingered, then nodded to Wolfe and exited. Alexandra stayed seated. "You handled that well," she said finally. "I handled it precisely," Wolfe replied. She stood. "Will you be returning the recipe?" "No," Wolfe said. "Mr. Lafarge will. Under your supervision." She offered a cool, dry smile. "I assume you want a copy." "I want a lunch," Wolfe said, prepared under his direction, using the final recipe, once it is safe to do so. She gave a half laugh. "I'll arrange it." After she left, I sank into my chair. Well, I said. That was clean, by Wolfe standards. He grunted. So what tipped it? Mr. Lornan's vocabulary, Wolfe said. He referred to the dish as a culmination. That word was used by both Miss Veal and Mr. Poirot, but never publicly. Only someone who had seen the page could have known that. I shook my head. You're a monster. No, Wolfe said. Lafarge is a monster. I am merely his interpreter. Dinner was served half an hour later. Duck livers with red wine shallots. Wolfe took one bite, closed his eyes and said, "Not Lafarge, but sincere." And that was good enough for all of us. The following morning peace settled back over the brownstone like a cashmere throw. Fritz was humming under his breath in the kitchen. An aria about veal, if I was translating correctly, and Wolfe had returned to his regular routine of silent disapproval over the Times crossword. He'd already informed me over soft-boiled eggs and toast with imported gooseberry preserves that there would be no follow-up interviews, no interviews at all in fact, unless someone disturbed the balance of his post-case digestion. I took that as a cue to finally sit at my desk and file the necessary notes for Wolfe's records. He liked everything documented, even when the case involved no official crime. Theft of intellectual property, in Wolfe's view, was often more serious than homicide. At least murderers usually had the decency to be obvious. As I typed up the sequence of events, my phone buzzed. It was Saul. "Morning," he said. "Thought you'd want this." I kept an eye on Ormond. "You didn't have to." "I know, but I was curious." "Saul," I said, "when you're curious, people end up confessing things they didn't even do." He chuckled. "Don't worry, I didn't break him. But you'll want to know he met with someone last night." I sat up straighter. "Who?" "Freddie Link." That name earned a pause. Freddie Link was not, strictly speaking, a chef. He was what you might call a culinary media fixer. He ghost-wrote celebrity cookbooks, arranged back-channel licensing deals, and knew exactly how many champagne flutes had been thrown during filming of the last 4 network cooking competitions. The fact that Ormond was talking to him meant one of two things: he was selling, or he was panicking. "Where?" "Corner booth at Lorenzo's in Tribeca." They sat for 25 minutes. Link left with a flash drive. Ormond didn't touch his food. I jotted that down. "Thanks, Saul. Anything else?" "Yeah." Ormond looked like someone had squeezed lemon juice in his conch. "If he has one." I hung up and stood. Wolfe glanced at me. "You're moving," he said. "That is rarely good." Ormond met with Freddie Link. Gave him a flash drive. "Ah. Want me to retrieve it?" "No." That stopped me. "No." Wolfe set down the crossword. "Mr. Ormond has lost his leverage. He does not know it yet, but he will discover it soon enough. Freddie Link is a showman, not a chef. He'll package anything if he thinks it will sell. And precisely why we wait. Mr. Lafarge is preparing a public statement. Once he declares the recipe restored, and notes that any version leaked in advance is a fabrication, Mr. Link will lose interest. He traffics in exclusivity, but the flash drive, let it dangle, Wolfe said. If it is bait, it will catch nothing. If it is a weapon, it has already misfired. Still, something didn't sit right. I paced the room, then turned back. There's one thing I keep circling back to. "Yes?" "Sherry Trimble." She turned down Ormond's offer. But she never explained how he got access to the original page. "You said it was during a call one she took. But what if?" Wolfe tilted his head. "Go on. What if the call wasn't accidental? What if it was staged to draw her away?" He steepled his finger. "Then she was either duped or complicit." I nodded. "And what's more, no one verified how the page got back in Ormond's hands. If it wasn't handed over by Sherry, then someone else had to slip it to him. But why?" Wolfe closed his eyes. "Miss Veal." I blinked. "Alexandra. She benefited more than anyone else," Wolfe murmured. "If Lafarge's climax was suppressed, her publishing schedule wouldn't be disrupted. She could release a delayed edition, then license the true version months later as an exclusive. 1 manuscript, 2 profits." I whistled. "That's cold." "It is not uncommon. Ambition is rarely warm." Want me to poke around? No, Wolfe said. Invite her back. Again, I thought. Alexandra Veal had the self-possession of a woman who owned every elevator she stepped into. Calling her in again would require something real, so I made it real. I dialed her office and said, Miss Veal, Wolfe has had a revision. He thinks it best that you come in today. To discuss what? To ensure that your legacy doesn't end with an asterisk. That got her attention. She arrived just before 3. This time she wore deep navy and no jewelry, as if dressing down for an interrogation she didn't intend to acknowledge. She greeted me coolly and entered the office without waiting to be announced. Wolfe regarded her from his chair. No rise, no preamble. Miss Veal, he said, your name does not appear in any of the transfer logs for the manuscript. Yet your presence, your influence is felt throughout. I am the managing editor, she said evenly. That's my job. And what did you edit precisely? Her eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting I removed the recipe? No, Wolfe said. I am suggesting you knew it would be removed, and that you saw opportunity in its absence. A beat of silence passed between them like a held breath. Then she said, I reach when something is out of place. And in this case, that something is motive. Mr. Almond is prideful, not strategic. Miss Trimble is guilty of omission, not conspiracy. Mr. Poirot is disinterested. Only you stood to profit, legally and reputationally, from both the loss and the recovery of Lafarge's manuscript. She folded her arms. And what exactly do you intend to do with that theory? Nothing, Wolfe said. That surprised her. It surprised me. You will correct the record, Wolfe continued. You will issue a statement that no copies, digital or physical, were ever in circulation beyond authorized parties. You will disavow any alternate publication, and you will do it before Mr. Link tries to license something that belongs to Mr. Lafarge. Her lip twitched. And if I don't? Wolfe smiled faintly. Then Mr. Lafarge will be encouraged to conduct a very public review of your internal chain of custody. I imagine that would affect your future acquisitions. Another beat of silence. Then she rose. Very well. I'll handle it. She turned, paused at the door. You're wasted on crime, Mr. Wolfe. I agree, Wolfe said, but crime insists. She left. I exhaled. You sure that'll stick? I asked. She is a woman who values order and reputation. Both were threatened today. And Almond, he will vanish, or reinvent himself, or sell frozen risotto to tourists. That night, over duck à l'orange and caramelized leeks, Wolfe lifted his fork with uncharacteristic lightness. The world, he said, has far too many cooks, but just enough recipes to expose them. I raised a glass. To the one that didn't stay missing. He sniffed, but drank, and for the first time all week Wolfe smiled. I was reading the Post, not because I expected news, but because it was too early for anything else to make sense when Wolfe's voice cut through the silence from the dining room. Archie, my compliments to Fritz, and then call Mr. Lafarge. Now Wolfe offering compliments to the chef was like a pope offering marriage advice. You noticed when it happened. I passed the praise along to Fritz, who gave me a dignified nod and returned to the stove. Then I went to the office to call Lucien Lafarge. As always, getting him on the line was like getting the Kremlin to return a voicemail. But I finally reached his assistant, who transferred me after a bit of throat clearing. Lafarge came on sounding like he was mid-battle with a particularly uncooperative source. What now? He barked. Mr. Wolfe requests a brief conversation. About your restored manuscript. He's read the final page. He has a refinement to suggest. There was a silence that sounded like rage simmering over low heat. Then grudgingly, fine. 2 o'clock. When I hung up, Wolfe looked up from the second copy of Larousse Gastronomique he kept by his desk like a lawyer with case law. He'll come. He will. But don't expect him to listen. Wolfe grunted. He will listen. He will not change, but he will listen. The rest of the morning passed quietly. Fritz brought in mid-morning coffee with a saffron biscotti that Wolfe ignored and I didn't. I used the time to finalize the case notes. Wolfe dictated his commentary, a meticulous breakdown of motive, sequence and character role. Reading Wolfe's summaries is like reading a dissection, clinical, precise and slightly disturbing in its detachment. At 2 on the dot, Lucien Lafarge arrived, dressed in a three-piece grey suit with a cravat the color of uncooked liver. He looked at me like I had wronged him in a past life and swept into the office as if expecting fanfare. Wolfe did not rise. "Mr. Lafarge, sit. I do not care for chairs like this," he said, sniffing. "It does not care for you either," Wolfe replied. "Lafarge." Wolfe opened a folder. "You have reconstructed the missing page." "I have." "You've returned it to Miss Veal for typesetting." "Yes. And now," Wolfe said, "you intend to reclaim what was lost." Lafarge narrowed his eyes. "Is there a point to this?" "There is," Wolfe said. "Your recipe, the culmination, is flawed." I froze. Even Fritz, passing the hall with a tray, slowed. Lafarge went still. "Flawed," he said, like the word offended the air. Wolfe nodded. "The reduction. You call for a demi-glace base with calvada. Acceptable. But then you introduce pomegranate molasses." "A contrast," Lafarge interrupted. "A contradiction," Wolfe countered. "Pomegranate is aggressive. It overshadows the calvados. If the intention is elevation, not obliteration, the proportions are reversed." "I have made it," Wolfe said. "Twice. Once to your specifications and once to mine. The second succeeds." There was a moment of complete silence. Then Lafarge leaned forward. "Show me." Fritz must have been waiting in the wings because he appeared as if summoned, carrying a silver tray with two identical white porcelain sauce dishes, each filled with a gleaming auburn liquid. He set them down with the reverence of a man presenting a newborn. Lafarge took a spoon, tasted the first. His face contorted as he swirled and swallowed. Then he tried the second, and paused. "I see," he said finally. "Yours is subtler." "It is correct," Wolfe said. Lafarge studied him. "I could accuse you of tampering, sabotage." "You could," Wolfe said, "but you won't, because you will adopt the revision. Quietly. Then you will proceed with publication. No fanfare. No footnote." Lafarge set down the spoon. "You think you're clever. I think I am precise." They stared at each other like generals who both knew how the war ended, but disagreed on the treaty wording. Then Lafarge gave the smallest of nods. "Very well." And just like that, the volcano went dormant. After he left, Wolfe sat back and closed his eye. "That," he said, "was exhausting. You didn't move. My mind moved. Yours may not recognize the strain." "Chache," I said. "So now we're done." He gave a non-committal grunt. "Not quite," he said. "What's left?" He opened his eyes. "Miss Trimble." I blinked. Again. "She remains an ambiguity," he said. "She did not profit. She did not leak. Yet she concealed." I dislike questions with incomplete grammar. So I called her. Sherry Trimble arrived an hour later, looking tired. She wore a cream blouse with a faint stain on the sleeve, and the sort of expression you get when you've been waiting to exhale for days. Wolfe gestured to the chair. "Miss Trimble," he said, "I have a final question." "Yes. Why did you lie?" She blinked. "You did not give Almond a page," Wolfe said. "But you did know he had it, before he showed it to you." She hesitated. Wolfe said, "You left the manuscript unattended intentionally, to allow him access. You didn't help him, but you didn't stop him." She looked down. "I thought," she said softly, "if he got it, maybe it would be over. The delays, the tantrums, Lucien would be exposed, and we could move on." "You hoped for disruption," Wolfe said. "I was tired," she whispered. Wolfe leaned back. "And now, I just want to keep my job, and sleep." "You will do both," Wolfe said. "But know this, ambiguity tempts destruction. Choose clarity next time." She nodded, a little shakily, then left. The sun was going down. Fritz entered with a small bowl of olives and a wedge of goat cheese wrapped in grape leaves. Wolfe regarded them approvingly. "Well," I said, "now we're done." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Now we are done." And in the golden quiet of the brownstone, we let the last questions dissolve, like salt into a perfectly reduced sauce. By Friday morning, you could almost pretend the whole thing hadn't happened. The house was quiet, the kitchen hummed with contented activity, and Wolfe had returned to his schedule as if a signature dish hadn't been abducted and nearly repurposed by culinary insurgents. I had a bruise on my shin from bumping into the umbrella stand during Almond's exit 2 nights earlier, and a vague suspicion we weren't entirely out of the stew yet. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the doorbell rang. It wasn't Saul, he never rings twice, or Lon, who always calls first. It wasn't the mailman either. I opened the door and stared at the last person I expected. Freddie Link. He stood in a tan linen suit, the kind that never wrinkles even if the man inside it does. His smile was made of expensive dentistry and calculated charm. "Goodwin," he said. "You're hard to catch." "Try jogging shoes," I said. "You're early, or late." "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. "That depends on whether you brought a bomb or just a mild scandal." He came in and looked around with the kind of appreciation people reserve for rooms that smell of money and restraint. I showed him to the office, where Wolfe, reading an 18th century treatise on vinegar, did not look up. "Mr. Link," he said, "you are unexpected." "So I've been told." "You are not welcome," Wolfe added, more softly. Freddie laughed as if he hadn't heard. "I came to make peace, and perhaps propose a business arrangement." Wolfe snorted. "I do not arrange business, I discourage disorder." "Well then, allow me to offer you a peek behind the curtain," Link said, lowering himself into the red chair like a man settling into a negotiation. "You're aware, I assume," he went on, "that Derek Almond gave me a flash drive. He claimed it contained notes, maybe even drafts of Lafarge's secret recipe." "We are aware," I said. "And also aware that the flash drive contained gibberish." Link's eyebrows flicked. "Then I'm ahead of you. It contained something all right, but not what he said. A few real Lafarge phrases, maybe lifted from emails or scraps, but the core, it was a Frankenstein job. Bits of classic recipes, some lifted from obscure Eastern European chefs, and a few ingredients I'm pretty sure were invented during a fever dream." I gave him a look. "You bothered to test it?" "I had my team mock it up yesterday morning," he said. Our house chef nearly walked out. Wolfe, finally, raised his eyes. "Why are you here?" "Because it's over. The recipe is back where it belongs. Lafarge's reputation is intact, and I suspect you had more to do with that than you let on." "Observation, not involvement," Wolfe said. "Either way," Link said, leaning forward, "I came to say I'm shelving the pitch. Nothing will be released under Almond's name, not now, not ever." "Magnanimous," Wolfe said flatly. Link's grin sharpened. "And in return, I thought perhaps Mr. Lafarge might consider a filmed series, a companion to the cookbook, something elegant, intimate, controlled. The real dish, served his way. I'd handle the production, of course, under Miss Veal's supervision." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "So this is flattery disguised as a deal." "This is opportunity," Link said. "Lafarge has been untouchable for years, now he's been wronged. The world loves a comeback. You are a vulture, Mr. Link." He smiled again. "But I eat well." Wolfe made a sound like a low boil. "I will inform Mr. Lafarge of your interest. Whether he chooses to respond is beyond my concern." "Fair enough," Link said, rising. "I always believe in making the offer, just in case." After he left, Wolfe rubbed his temple and muttered something about scavengers. I poured another cup of coffee and waited. "You're not actually going to pass that on, are you?" I asked. "I will," Wolfe said, "because Lafarge deserves the dignity of refusal." I nodded. "Do you think he'll bite?" "Perhaps. But not now. His ego must finish digesting its bruises." There was a lull then. The brownstone creaked a little as the June air pressed against the windows. Fritz clinked something in the kitchen. For a moment I thought we'd finally arrived at the end. But just then the phone rang. I picked it up. "Yeah." It was Lon Cohen, voice quick and low. "You'd better sit down." I stayed standing. "Go." "Early this morning, someone broke into the culinary office. No major damage, but the storage room was entered. The final manuscript proofs, including Lafarge, were tampered with." I blinked. "Tampered how?" "They were moved, handled. Nothing stolen, apparently, but something weird." "What?" "The final page, the one that was missing and then restored, someone left a printed note beside it. No envelope, no signature. It said perfection is not earned. It's borrowed." I relayed this to Wolfe in real time. His expression didn't change, but his fingertips pressed harder against one another. "Lon," I said, Do they have security footage? Spotty. One camera in the back stairwell was disabled. The other caught a figure in a hoodie, but no clear idea when. Between 3 and 4 a.m. I thanked him and hung up. Wolfe tapped the armrest of his chair. This is not Almond. He lacks subtlety, nor link. He's finished profiting. No, this is a signature. A message. I said what we were both thinking. Someone else still wants that recipe. Or, Wolfe said softly, wants to prove it never belonged to Lafarge in the first place. It landed with a thud. I sat down. Any suspects? One, Wolfe said. But not yet provable. I waited. He didn't elaborate. Instead he said, Archie, fetch me the original handwriting sample from Mr. Lafarge's file. Then call Saul. Why? Because, he said, eyes narrowed, I want that note, and whoever left it. Note. I didn't argue. An hour later, Saul was dispatched to get a copy of the note from culinary. He returned with it by 6. Fritz served early supper, Cornish game hens with a green peppercorn glaze, and Wolfe didn't speak until he'd finished both his plate and the evaluation of Lafarge's handwriting samples. He compared them with a magnifying glass, then leaned back. It is not Lafarge, he said. Wolfe didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out the window. There are ghosts in that kitchen, he murmured. But they're not dead. Just hiding. I didn't like the way that sounded. Are we done? I asked. No, he said. The recipe is safe. The case is closed. But the war, Archie, he tapped the desk once, has just begun. And just like that, our quiet little gastronomic puzzle had grown fangs. I sighed, leaned back in my chair and loosened my tie. The sauce had thickened. Again. The next morning, before even Fritz had fired up the copper pans, Wolfe summoned me to the office. That alone was enough to curdle cream. The sun had barely lifted off the fire escapes, and already the brownstone's piece was cracking under the weight of Wolfe's mood. He sat in his chair like it owed him money, arms folded across his considerable chest, eyes fixed not on me, but on the folded sheet of paper on his blotter. The note, the one left at culinary beside Lafarge's manuscript. Perfection is not earned, it's borrowed. He didn't speak right away. He let the silence work, thick and deliberate, until I broke it. You're not blaming me for that stunt, are you? He grunted. No. I am blaming myself for not probing deeper when I should have. I blinked. That's a first. He ignored me. I had presumed the motive was rivalry, jealousy, perhaps revenge. But this, he tapped the note with one thick finger. This is something else. Philosophical, coded. I frowned. You think it's about more than just a stolen recipe? I think, Wolfe said, it was never about the recipe. That shut me up. For a moment. You're going to have to explain that. Wolfe leaned back. Archie, every person we interviewed, the suspects, the assistants, even Lafarge himself, treated the final recipe as the crown jewel of the book. But what if that was misdirection? It was the page that vanished. Precisely, he said. What better place to hide the true crime than in plain sight? He reached into the bottom drawer and pulled out a thin red folder. I recognized it. The master timeline Miss Veal had delivered early in the case. Wolfe laid it flat, opened it to the back. Look here. The galley proofs passed through 3 departments before the disappearance. But in between layout and typesetting, the manuscript spent 4 hours in what Miss Trimble labeled as storage hold. I nodded. Yeah. I remember. Storage hold, Wolfe repeated. An office closet. Unsecured. No log entries. Why? Because no one thought anything could happen in there. No, Wolfe said. Because they didn't want anyone noticing what did happen in there. Now he had my attention. You're saying something else was taken. Not taken, added. He rose. Yes, rose, pushed himself out of the chair like a barge straining upriver, and moved to the bookcase. He pulled down the advance copy of Lafarge's cookbook that Alexandra had sent over for Wolfe's final review. He opened to the introduction. Read it, he said. I took the book and read aloud. In these pages lies a journey through taste, memory, and the sacred science of precision. What you find here is not invention, but evolution, built on a foundation of those who came before. Wolfe stared at me. Anything strike you? I shrugged. Standard pomp. He tapped the last line. Built on a foundation of those who came before. That is not Lucien Lafarge. That is not his voice. He has never credited anyone. You're right, I said slowly. He treats his own tongue like it's the first one to taste food. So Wolfe said, returning to his chair. Either he is evolving, or someone else inserted that passage. A beat passed. And whoever did, I said, might have also left that note. Wolfe nodded. There is a hand here we have not yet seen. One that touched the manuscript and then vanished. I exhaled. So we've been chasing shadows in the dining room, while someone's been tampering with the menu. Indeed. He steepled his fingers again. We need Saul. Again. I phoned Saul Panzer, and within the hour he was sitting across from Wolfe, a pad in his lap, eyes sharp. There is a ghost in the machinery, Wolfe said. Find them. Saul raised an eyebrow. You want me to trace edits made to a physical manuscript? Weeks ago. Not all edits, Wolfe said. Just one. That paragraph in the introduction. The rest of the manuscript reflects Lafarge's voice. That sentence does not. Saul didn't blink. Got it. He was gone 20 minutes later. The day crept forward like an omelette over low heat. Fritz served lunch pork, tenderloin with shallot jam, and Wolfe barely noticed. He was rereading the manuscript, muttering under his breath about syntax. I took the opportunity to call Alexandra. Veal. She answered after 3 rings. Her tone was tight. Goodwin. Any news on the break-in? None that I'm allowed to share. Building security is reviewing badge access. No one wants a scandal. I believe someone tampered with the book after the page was restored. Her pause wasn't long, but it was telling. You're certain? Yeah. Wolfe thinks the intro paragraph was inserted without authorization. Another pause. Then we have a bigger problem. I'm listening. She lowered her voice. Lafarge didn't write his own introduction. What? He refused. Said preambles were for amateurs and publishers. So I assigned it to one of our senior proof editors, discreetly. And their name is. She hesitated. Come on, I said. You want this buried or solved? Her voice returned, clipped. Dawn Renner. She's worked here 8 years, mostly anonymous. Footnotes, appendices. She knew how to blend styles. I jotted the name. Where is she now? Off today. Any chance she's connected to the break-in? Beloved seeker, pause and receive this divine revelation. The celestial gates are opening, specifically for. She's quiet, obsessive, resentful of Lafarge. If I'm honest, thought he was a fraud. Well, I said, she might have just proved it. Wolfe listened to the summary, eyes closed, one palm flat on the desk like a seer, reading vibrations through wood grain. So, I concluded, she inserts a paragraph that undermines Lafarge's self-image, then sneaks in to leave a note accusing him of borrowing perfection. Wolfe opened his eyes. Yes, and what's her endgame? He looked at me. She wants to be seen and heard. It was nearly 6 when Saul returned, this time carrying a plastic sleeve containing a red-edged paper scrap. She made the note from a discarded galley, torn from a page that only proofreaders would have had access to. Dawn Renner's badge was used that night to enter the office, timed exactly when the break-in occurred. Wolfe gave a small nod. That, he said, will suffice. He picked up the phone and dialed Lafarge himself. I don't know what was said. Wolfe dismissed me with a look the second the man answered, but 20 minutes later, Wolfe emerged from the office. It is done, he said. I waited. Nothing more came. You're going to make me ask, aren't you? She will not be prosecuted. She will be dismissed quietly. And Lafarge will rewrite the introduction himself. And the quote, Wolfe smiled faintly. He will keep it, but as his own. I snorted. So perfection is borrowed. No, Wolfe said. It's repurposed. We dined that night on mushroom risotto and grilled squab. As I poured the wine, Wolfe sighed with satisfaction. Archie, if I ever permit a ghostwriter into my kitchen, shoot me. I lifted my glass. With what? I asked. A piping bag. He scowled, but he drank, and outside, In the quiet hush of a New York evening, the recipe finally stayed where it belonged between the covers. Sunday arrived soft and gray, the kind of morning Wolfe claimed was suitable only for mushroom hunting or introspection, and he had no desire to indulge in either. He said it from behind his copy of the Times book review while sipping a precise cup of Ceylon Black. I said nothing. After the week we'd had, I was happy to sit in silence, just me, my toast and the faint aroma of Fritz's potato cakes sizzling in the kitchen. But peace, as always in the brownstone, had the life expectancy of a mayfly. At 9:17 the phone rang. I glanced at Wolfe, who closed his eyes and murmured, "Blast." I picked up. "Goodwin. Archie. It's Lon. Thought you'd want to know before you read it. That depends. Is it food poisoning scandal or posthumous fame?" Column 2, page A4, bottom left. I pulled the paper toward me, flipped through. Wolfe, not bothering to ask, sipped his tea and waited. I read the paragraph aloud. Sources close to culinary confirmed late Saturday that editor Dawn Renner, formerly a senior proof consultant, has resigned amid controversy surrounding unapproved contributions to the forthcoming Lafarge cookbook. An internal review described the issue as an isolated deviation. Miss Lafarge has declined public comment. Wolfe didn't react, but I saw the way he reached for his egg spoon with renewed purpose. "She got out clean," I said. "She got out quiet," Wolfe replied. "That is preferable." Lon was still on the line. "You two are done with this circ." I looked at Wolfe, who grunted. "We're done. For now." "Good. Because there's already buzz about a second edition of Lafarge's book with commentary." I raised a brow. "From who?" "From him, allegedly. First-person essays, candid thought, the man behind the knife kind of thing." I gave Wolfe the gist. He grunted again, deeper. "He's evolving," I said. "Or rebranding." "Same thing," Wolfe muttered. "In marketing." Lon chuckled and hung up. I turned to Wolfe. "So that's it. No more notes. No last-minute culinary confessions." He set his cup down. "There is one." He motioned for me to retrieve the manila folder he'd kept at the bottom of the drawer since the case began. The one with the client name Culinary and Ville, A, in block type. He opened it, removed a single sheet, typed, with annotations in Wolfe's thick black ink, and passed it to me. It was a letter. "Dear Miss Ville, while our engagement has concluded, I offer a final recommendation not as investigator but as reader. Do not permit the cult of genius to overpower the discipline of structure. In culinary art, as in literature, it is not the crescendo that sustains memory, but the progression that leads to it. The missing page was not your scandal, it was your warning. Nero Wolfe." I read it once, then again. "You never sent it." "No. Why? She does not need it. She knows." I folded it and placed it back in the folder. For the rest of the morning, Wolfe disappeared into the plant room. I worked on filing, sending Saul his final check, and dictating a one-page summary for the Brownstone archives, including a line Wolfe insisted on adding, "Let it be recorded. The crime was not culinary. It was philosophical. Fritz called us to lunch at 1 p.m. Lamb shoulder with rosemary polenta and a green garlic puree." Wolfe closed his eyes on the first bite, and pronounced it honest. When we returned to the office afterward, I settled into my chair and said, "So what was the real story if you had to boil it down?" Wolfe glanced at me, lifted a brow. "I never boil anything down, Archie. It dilutes." "Fine. Sear it." He sighed, but obliged. A woman grew tired of silence. A man feared obscurity. A second man believed theft could grant legitimacy. A chef clung too tightly to his own myth, and a publishing house tried to contain them all. "That's not a mystery," I said. "That's a novella." "No," he said. "That's America." That quieted me for a moment. I stood, walked to the window, watched as a delivery man stacked boxes on the sidewalk next door. Life, unlike manuscripts, never stayed perfectly structured. "Are you actually going to read the final version of Lafarge's book?" "Of course," Wolfe said. "I want to see whether he credits the pomegranate correction. And if he doesn't," Wolfe closed his eye, "then I will send him a crate of Calvados and a note that reads, 'You lost the war of taste. I accept your surrender.'" I laughed. "Should I write that down?" "No. You'll remember it." And I did. "Chose you in this sacred moment. Your spirit has been chosen for an extraordinary purpose. Type 333. If you feel this ancient wisdom stirring in your soul, the universe awaits your acknowledgement. The case of the missing page, which began with a tear in a manuscript and ended with a wound to ego, was finally over, but it left its prints, like flour on a black apron, unmistakable, indelible, and somehow human. The brownstone had returned to order, dinner would be on time, and for once, neither genius nor sabotage would get the last word. Wolfe would. Of course, Wolfe was in the plant rooms communing with his orchids. No emergencies, no page snatchers, no culinary melodrama, just chlorophyll, humidity, and silence. I, on the other hand, was finishing the case file. The last page, ironically, had to be rewritten twice. Wolfe had me revise a line in which I referred to Alexandra Veal as sharp, insisting that shrewd was more precise. He was probably right. As I typed, the phone rang. Wolfe had re-entered the office precisely 10 minutes earlier, freshly rotund and smelling faintly of bergamot, and now gestured at the receiver like it was beneath his concern. I picked up. Archie Goodwin. A familiar voice responded. I thought you'd want to hear it from me, Miss Veal. Of course. I just left a meeting with Lafarge and the board. It's done. The book goes to press next week. Final version. No annotations, no bonus insights, just his voice, uninterrupted. No essays, no personality pieces, no distractions, she said. We've agreed. The dish stands alone. I glanced at Wolfe. He nodded once. I appreciate the call, I said. And Wolfe, she paused, let him know he was right. About the recipe, about the paragraph, and about the risk of letting silence disguise sabotage. He'll enjoy hearing that. I doubt he will, she said, but tell him anyway. I hung up. Wolfe was already lowering himself into his chair with a satisfied sigh. She has survived, he said, and learned. Acceptable. She also said you were right. He waved it away, as if praise had calories. Fritz entered just then, with a small silver plate balanced in one hand. On it sat a thin slice of pastry, golden, delicate, flaky, with an aromatic glaze that hinted at lavender. Wolfe sniffed. What is the chef's interpretation, Fritz said, of the lost recipe? A dessert, instead of a main. Wolfe eyed it. And your sauce? Fritz smiled. A whisper from Miss Trimble, her penance. I watched Wolfe take a forkful. He chewed, slowly, thoughtfully, then he nodded. Good, he said. Very good. So, I said, no more mystery, no more chaos. And the missing page? Wolfe tapped his desk lightly with one fingertip. It was never the page, Archie. It was the people who circled it, what they thought it meant. Genius, revenge, opportunity, and now, Wolfe said, it is only a page, and that is how it should be. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and said no more. I wrote the last line of the report and slid it into the folder, and just like that, the brownstone was whole again. Dinner was on time, the manuscript was intact, and the only thing left to digest was dessert.